009956. The big question today: should absent parents be punished for not paying their CSA, their child maintenance? It says separated parents who refuse to pay their child support could face ruining their own credit rating, and a tough new powers to be brought in next year. Ray Barry is from Wolverhampton, chair of Real Fathers for Justice. Good morning, Ray.
Good morning to you, Danny.
Good morning. Welcome to the show. Should absent fathers, and I'm generalising now, but let's just stick with it, should they be punished for not paying for their kids?
Well, I think that the point is that they laws should be enforced, but the issue of seeing your children should be linked as a matter of law with paying child support. And I really think that this would deal with an awful lot of the problems which your callers have been making this morning. I've got a lot of sympathy with the guy, Mr. Anonymous, who was speaking a little while ago about not being allowed to see his 10-year-old child, but still being chased for child support. And I think it's that fundamental injustice which drives a lot of this behaviour of trying to avoid paying child support, and it could be fixed by linking the two.
Nevertheless, Ray, it's the kids who are suffering.
But I don't think that enforcing child support in the way that the government is doing addresses the need of the kids. I mean, you had...
they're not having new shoes when they got holes in the shoes. They're not going every now and again to the cinema because of the Mars skins. Well, I mean, I think one of your previous callers, Dave, had addressed this point very, very well when he said that he used to be buying these things for his children. But I think the phrase he used, he said when the money went to the child's mother, she'd spend it on ciggies. And there's a very important point here that there's no legal obligation for the mother who receives the money to spend it on the children. There's an assumption that that's what she's going to do, but I'm sure there's a lot of people like Dave who will say that I want this money to go to support my children, but I know that my ex-wife, my ex-partner, goes out clubbing with the money that I give to her. You see,
and there's no way of enforcing...
well, I mean, I don't know how they'd enforce that. I mean, what would they do? Give vouchers for shoes and cinema? And how would they enforce that?
I think a simple start would be that there should be an introduction into child support law, a very simple thing that says that the recipient parent is obliged to spend the money on the children.
Well, an obligation.
It's a glaring omission.
Well, Ray, I mean, listen, if you get 150 quid from your ex and you spend it on ciggies and clubbing, you don't really care what the advice should be or the obligation.
Well, the thing is, once the obligation is there in law, you've then got a foothold to try and enforce it in various ways. But if the obligation isn't there, then the mother who's spending it inappropriately can boast about it on Facebook. In your face, and that is so galling when that happens.
No, I can imagine it is, yeah.
And I mean, this is part of the root of why, dads in that situation are saying, I'm just, I'm so annoyed by this that I'm just not going to pay it anymore.
Do you think, Ray, though, that the system allows for any sympathy behind these stories? I think they have to be fairly strict and they have to have boundaries, don't they? Otherwise, it's so arbitrary. There's going to be little hearings all across the country and fellas will be saying, well, she smokes 20 a day and the judge will say, well, hang on, no, you still got to put shoes on your kids. It's just going to clog the system down, isn't it?
Well, I think that very often legislation drives behaviour without needing enforcement. And once there is an obligation there in law, that will drive an awful lot of the behaviour without need for, as you say, clogging up courts with hearings or tribunals with various forms of hearings. Just a simple statement in the law would fix that. But if I may, Danny, I think that what's often missed in this debate is the lack of any connection between an entitlement to see children and an obligation to pay for them. And it's that is this fundamental injustice that drives the exasperation that some of your callers have been giving this morning. Those two things need to be linked. A father who is barred from seeing his children for no good reason should not be obliged to pay child support. I think that's not the legal position at the moment, but it's certainly the moral position, and it ought to be reflected in law. I mean, this new power that's been announced as coming in next year, to be honest, it's fairly small beer compared to some of the things there already.
Can I just ask you, just to explore for a second, how do you detach yourself emotionally? You know, let's rewind 30 seconds. If you're not allowed to see your kids, so the mum is using the child as a pawn and belligerently she just refuses and she spins a yarn in court, whatever. Don't you still love your child enough to make sure that they have new shoes?
I think what gets in the way here, Danny, I mean, if I could just say in my own case, I didn't get to see two of my children throughout their growing up years, and I paid child support religiously all the time, never missed. But I can't begin to tell you how galling that was, because I knew that money wasn't going to my children. It was going to the person who was preventing me seeing my children. And every month when that money went out to my bank account, I just had to bite my tongue and just think about something else. So emotionally, it is very, 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 very difficult. I mean, in terms of the emotional effect on people, I mean, the suicide rate among men is 3 times as high as it is among women. And many of those who commit suicide are dads who simply can't face carrying on living because they're without their children. And the state just has no compassion for those fathers. There is no enforcement of their entitlement to see their children. And in fact, one of the more draconian powers that the CSA already has, far more serious than the ones that they're introducing next year, is that the CSA can pursue these fathers who commit suicide beyond the grave. They can claim arrears of CSA from their estate.
All right.
So the law won't enforce the dad's right while he's alive to see his children, but it will enforce his obligation to pay after he's dead.
Ray Barry, Chair of Real Fathers for Justice. Thanks for your time, Ray.
Thanks, Danny.
Thank you. 03453 009956. Let me just tell you, I spoke to a pal of mine who I will speak to and touch base with every 6 to 9 months. We were very close, but you know what it's like in life. Sometimes you sort of like separate and you move to one side of the country and you're just not as close. And I spoke to him last night, and I'm going to his 50th birthday party on November the 29th with my wife Danielle. And I tell you what, he was so upbeat and buoyant. He was like a new man. Let me tell you why. Because he's back in touch with his family. His son and his daughter's 19, his son is 24, and via Facebook he found the children, or the young adults now, and he's back in touch with them. And I tell you what, he was like a different guy. And let me be really honest with you, I'm not going to name him, but he tried to kill himself. Now, there was loads of problems in his life, but one of the problems in his life was the fact that his ex-wife or partner wouldn't allow him to see his children, and he tried to top himself. And you want to see the difference in the lad now. Honestly, he's like a new man. Lorraine's in Stourbridge. Hi, Lorraine.